Welcome to the Conversations for Change podcast, hosted by Asia Inc. Forum, where ideas spark action. Join in the conversation that's shaping the future of Brunei and the future of Asia, one conversation at a time. We bring you the latest local and global insights, conversations, and strategies for you to challenge your perspective. Follow and subscribe to Asia Inc. Forum BN on our YouTube channel, and also follow us on our LinkedIn, Instagram, and also Facebook on Asia Inc. Forum. Let's not talk about change. Let's make it happen, one conversation at a time. What does it take to truly thrive and not just survive in Brunei's business landscape? How can businesses here break barriers and succeed across the Asia Pacific? And also, what does it take to truly build wealth in 2025? In this episode, we sit down with none other than Dato Timothy Ong, our chairman and founder for Asia Inc. Forum. Dato, welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about the highs and lows of doing business and also maybe perhaps gain some insights and secrets into attaining wealth in 2025. We're also trying to dive deep into what it takes to build something that truly lasts. If you could describe yourself, Dato, what is perhaps the best way for people to get to know Mr. Dato Timothy Ong?
Thank you, Hannah. I would, if there's one word that I would use to describe myself, it would be that I'm a curious person. I'm especially curious about people.
Okay.
I like to know what makes them tick. I like to know what matters to them. And when they succeed, I like to know what happened.
Of course.
With a view to learning. So one of the key things about building something that lasts is to constantly learn. Now, I'm an old guy.
I will say,
well,
young at heart.
Everything depends on who one is comparing with.
Oh, that's true.
So now when I go into the room, there was a time
Yeah.
when I would go into the room and I would say, hey, I'm one of the youngest guys here.
Oh.
Now when I go into a room,
Okay.
usually I'm one of the oldest guys. Okay, so, but the key is never stop learning.
That's true.
You know,
Lifelong learning.
And frankly, I'm learning from you, Hannah.
Yeah.
You know, podcasts. I mean,
it's a new thing. It's a new way of engagement, and I think I managed to share this with you that online and in person events, it's a different translation. People are watching us invisibly from their homes, Dato. So
yeah. So when I first started in Asia Inc. Forum, for me, the idea of success, conference, 500 people, good vibe, nice photos, that's it.
Yeah.
In today's world, you say 500 people. People will say 500.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Because with a podcast, 500 would be a very, very small
number. Yeah. And you look at the total population, I think, in terms of, when it's online as well, Dato, you have 1,000 views, 2,000 views, and then at the same time, you can pause and you can sort of replay many moments as well. So it's a different time for us.
And I every time I see one of those clips that you do, whether it's the Baiduri launch,
of course,
whether it's Georgia giving her small intervention.
Oh, yes. And
I'm thinking, because it's the experience is different.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if you just hear it at the event, after a few days, you've forgotten about it.
Yeah.
So I'm learning. And if you had asked me 6 months ago, what is a podcast? I would have a vague idea. But here I am.
Of course. And perhaps one day you're also going to be moderating and you're going to be the podcast host after this. I understand that there's a difference in generation when it comes to us, Dato, but I want to understand more about what it was like for you way back when. I want to take it back to the very beginning. Take me back, Dato, to your early life, to growing up in your early childhood in Brunei back in the day.
Okay. I think there was a lot more person-to-person connection.
Of course.
Because there were no devices.
Yeah.
And there was no social media. So if you wanted to hang out with your friends, you had to call them. And you called them on a landline. And when you call someone on a landline, they may not be there to pick up the call.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, it's not like today where you just
WhatsApp everybody. Yeah.
So there was a lot more human connection. So life today is definitely a lot more convenient. But I think we've lost something.
Yeah.
So I notice even at our events, a number of people are on their phones.
Yep, yep.
I have to remind myself when I'm with people who matter to me, don't look at your phone.
That's true. That is a reminder to myself as well. That even in meetings and everything, phone away, dinner, phone away.
And I tell young people, if they want to impress their prospective employer,
yeah, understood.
Don't glance at your phone.
Yeah, it's not great. Yeah,
because even if it's just a glance, it signals, hey, my mind is somewhere else.
That's true. And you're not there present in person and just focused on the conversation. Understood.
So I would say the big difference is the connection between people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying it was all good then and not so good now, because there are so many advantages.
Mm-hmm.
But the human connection part was, in my view, better.
Understood, Dato. And perhaps I think the weight and value to things as well. I mean, maybe for now people are easily connected through a video call, and you can, call family whether they are based in London and in Australia, Singapore. It's an easy call away. But I mean, once upon a time, people wrote letters, and it was really, I think, much more meaningful.
That's a good point. So I have a good friend who lives in a country that I will not mention.
Okay.
Because it's a country that people have strong feelings about.
Understood, yeah.
In the sense that there is very little individual freedom.
Okay.
So he was recently in a situation where he had lost his freedom.
Okay.
Fortunately, he's regained it.
Okay.
And I wrote him a letter.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
I mean, this is a guy my age.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've never written, and it was a handwritten letter.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I remember saying to myself, do I write the usual things? A few lines. Hope you're doing well. Thinking of you. But I said no.
Yeah.
I said, I have to write at least 2 pages.
Yeah, very long.
So I wrote. And then a month or so later, because letters have to be...
Yeah, mailed. And it takes a while, of course, yeah.
I got a letter from him.
Oh, wow. Good response,
and, it's something I will keep because it's completely different.
Yeah.
From a WhatsApp message.
That's true.
Yes. So WhatsApp, nowadays we use emojis.
Yes,
right?
That's it. Like,
you send me something and I go,
thumbs up.
And sometimes we do that because we're kind of lazy.
Yeah, convenient.
Yeah, And if you're feeling affectionate, you put a heart.
Yeah, that's it, yes.
And sometimes you have to get your emojis right.
Right, of course. It might mean something else entirely, of course.
Yeah. But this exchange of letters reminded me that there was something deeper in the way we connect with each other if we take the trouble.
That's true. That's true. More meaningful connection. When we talk about meaningful connections, Dato, I kind of want to go back and I want to touch a bit on family for this one as well. How was family life like, Dato? I hear many great stories of, for example, your late mother, Dato, Datin Doris. Recently as well, we were there engaged for something called the Datin Doris Women's Empowerment Workshop that you, quote unquote, supported in the Philippines. What was family like for you, Dato?
So I was fortunate that I had loving parents.
Yeah, great.
But my father was a traditional Chinese father.
Okay.
So he spent a lot of his time working.
Yeah, of course.
And I remember we rarely hugged each other.
Oh, okay.
Because it was
very different.
Hugging was.
Yeah.
And it was like the handshake.
Would you consider that tough love, Dato?
No, he was a very loving man.
Yeah.
But it was just something that people rarely did.
It was not a form
But so now I make sure I've become a hugger.
Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah.
Because I think something happens when you hug someone.
That's true.
Now, obviously, you have to be discerning on not hugging people who don't want to be hugged. No, I'm talking about my kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I hug them.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
My mother was quite an outlier for her generation.
Okay. Yeah.
She was a strong, independent woman.
Wow.
And she was opinionated.
Mm.
So, because that was the time when women were not supposed to be opinionated.
Yeah, not to voice out things. But if you can remember, Dato, maybe perhaps one of the more memorable things that your mother has probably said, Dato, what is it, that one thing that you can hear in her voice that you remember to this day?
Well, she told me an amusing story,
Okay.
which I remember. So she was at a dinner with a diplomat. And my mother was one of these women who never wanted anyone to know how old she was.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah.
So,
Keep it a secret,
I mean, so I've learned
Yes.
that generally, unless you know a woman very well, you don't say, how
No,
old are you?
No, it's too direct that you cannot say that.
Now, if they're very young, it's okay.
Yeah,
But when they're getting into a zone where they're not so young,
understood.
they could be a bit sensitive.
Yeah, that can happen.
So this, one of the local guests at this dinner said to Datin, how old are you?
Oh, that's very direct.
And then she answered, ask no questions, and you will be told no lies.
Well, that's true, yes. In a polite way. Just like, please don't ask.
And but she had a sense of humor and she was direct.
Yeah, straightforward,
But don't ask her age.
Okay. It gives me a true picture of who perhaps Datin Doris was once upon a time.
Now, you learn from someone not by what they say.
That's true.
But by how they act.
Yeah.
So she was always strong and independent in the way she acted.
That's true.
Yeah. So it's not so much what she said to me that left a mark on me. It's how she behaved. Mm-hmm. So I've become an advocate, an admirer of strong, independent women, and an advocate of women's empowerment.
Yes, you have.
I think the world would be. It's already moving in that direction, but there's a lot more room to go.
Understood, Dato. I think just as an example, just yesterday we were doing our International Women's Day Forum. Like women have been breaking many barriers in terms of the organization, in terms of the corporate space. But in retrospect, at home, a lot of other things need to be discussed about. And I think during the conversation we had yesterday, Georgia made very good points as well. And that was coming from a different generation. So it's really a generational conversation when it comes to women's development and also leadership as well, Dato. Right?
Absolutely. So I think society still has heavier expectations on women.
Of course.
Yeah. So, I know that more and more men are stepping up at home.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling if we could peer right in
and really look into what's going on, of course.
Then there is the previous generation expecting daughters and daughter-in-laws to do the heavier lifting.
That's true.
That is true. When a woman does the heavy lifting, generally it is kind of expected.
Yeah.
When a man does it, he's such a nice man.
It's great. He did the laundry today. He cooked today. It's amazing.
Yeah, like he cooks once a month. And that's like a major achievement.
Yeah, there you go. It shouldn't be that way, Dato. We touched on a little bit of leadership just now. And, as a leader yourself, Dato, you've held, I would say, many hats. You are our chairman and you are our founder. And you also sit on various different boards, not just in Brunei, but also within the region. One question, plain and simple, is what do you think then defines a good leader in business, in organization?
So, the first thing is a leader has to be able to articulate a vision for the organization. Something that explains what the why.
The why, the big why, of course.
The big why. So, and it doesn't have to be a complicated thing.
Understood, yeah.
But it has to be relatable and understandable. Yeah.
Understood.
Then the leader has to walk the talk.
Understood.
Okay. Yeah. The world hates hypocrites.
Yeah, that's true.
So you don't tell your people, do this, and then you do something else.
That's true. Yes.
And the leader, I think, has to be a good listener. So I have a rule in life. If you want people to understand you, you must first understand. If you want to be understood, you must first understand.
That's true.
So at the end of the day, the leader makes the call. So my idea of a good meeting is everyone speaks.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I make the call.
Of course.
So once I've made the call, I expect my staff, my team, to rally around me.
Yeah. Run around it.
But I will commit myself to listening to everyone.
Of course.
But it doesn't mean I'm paralyzed by the listening.
Understood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
a leader
yeah.
has to make decisions.
Yeah.
The other thing about good leaders is when good things happen, the good leader gives credit to the team.
Of course.
The good leader likes to use we,
Yeah,
not I.
not team.
Yeah.
Understood,
So-
Dato. Understood.
So when you hear someone talk about their achievements and it's I,
It's not the greatest thing to hear. Understood, Dato.
And-
Yeah.
so someone told me that, again, I will not mention the organization,
Yeah.
but told me recently that his boss
Yeah.
has never once said, "What do you think?"
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. That is
Okay.
no. Yeah.
So it's more like, here is
Yeah,
what I think,
Let's go with
Yeah.
this entirely. Okay.
but not what do you think. So in my view,
Yeah.
and I'm not wanting to make a critical comment
Yeah.
because I don't know the full picture,
Of course.
but in my view, then when that happens, that's a deficiency in the leadership style.
There's
But you see,
something there.
in order to do that, you have to have a degree of self-confidence.
Yeah. That's
So very often when people are not confident, when they're insecure,
understood.
it doesn't bring out the best in them.
That's true. Yes, Dato. Yeah. And I think some people, in regards to leadership, they feel quote unquote intimidated by, for example, people who are much more cleverer, who are much more, I would say, skillful. But I think that shouldn't be the way in terms of like leadership now. I mean, there is no loss to having a well-rounded team or working with people who are much more smarter than you. As a leader, Dato, like I highly doubt that you're most likely the smartest one in the room. There's probably other people
No.
are very smart as well, and you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Dato?
I want to just say that
Yeah.
very often I'm not.
Right.
You see, because the key thing to know is we are not smart in the same way.
Yeah.
So, for example,
Yeah.
just give an example.
Yeah.
I have a terrible sense of direction.
Okay, no, run to that.
So-
Yes, yep.
So when I speak to my friends, so I'm sharing something
Yeah.
that maybe some people don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So I said, "Oh, I went to this very nice restaurant,"
Okay.
and then they say,
Yeah.
"Where is it?"
Where do you mean that though? Like,
Yeah.
where is this?
And then I would say, "Oh, then
Yeah.
suddenly I'm thinking, where is it?" So I would say, "Oh, Jalan Mora."
Oh.
And then
Yeah.
the next question is, where in Jalan
Oh
Mora?
goodness, that.
And then- So
Yeah.
Randy drives me.
Yeah. Right. Of course.
So when I get into the car, I will say to Randy, how long will we need to get to wherever it is?
Yeah, that's it.
And this is a journey I've done,
Yeah.
countless times.
Many times.
And Randy
yes.
will say, "Oh, today I think it's 15 minutes."
Yeah.
And then I will just then leave it all to him. Now, so as far as directions are concerned, I'm a moron.
Oh goodness,
Yeah,
Dato.
but when it comes to other things, I may be very good.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that we are not all clever in the same way.
Understood. That's
And
true.
we have to assemble a team of people, sometimes different from ourselves,
Yeah, that's true.
sometimes cleverer than ourselves in ways that we are not clever.
That's true, Dato. That's true, Dato. I think, in terms of putting a team together, you try to, I would say, like assemble, quote unquote, like the Avengers. You've got different various, superheroes wearing different capes, one's Thor, one's Captain America, one's, something else.
Yeah.
And you run that team of, I would say, like superheroes doing whatever it is that they're good in. So that's my take.
You know the expression, we need to learn to stay in our lane.
Yeah, that is true, Dato. Yeah.
So just because I may be clever in certain aspects of economics
Understood, yes.
doesn't mean that I am an expert on wellness.
Oh yeah, that understood, Dato. Yes. Everyone has different strengths that we have to play. Also, in terms of just getting to know you, Dato, as well, I think a lot of people understand and know this as well if they visit you at your home or even in our office here. You have such a strong love of books, right? You've had a love of books, I think, from a very young age.
Sure.
How many books do you think you have, Dato? And how is it?
I have lost track, but
Yeah.
I would say 10, 12,000.
That's a lot of books. And you've read every single book? Or?
I haven't.
Ah.
So I like to say that the only way I can make an inroad into reading my books is to have a long period of detention.
Oh, that's right.
But-
Yeah.
But I
all the time in
don't.
the
I don't want to have a long
No,
period.
Dato. Yes, just all the time in the world.
But
of
I
course.
love being surrounded by books.
Why is that, Dato?
I think it's a reassurance that some very clever people out there have done a lot of serious work on a subject, and that if I want to, it's there for me to look at.
Oh,
now we live in a world where most, people your age and Gen Z, they acquire their knowledge in small bites.
Yes, that's true.
Small bites.
That's true.
And I'm not saying small bites are no good.
Yeah.
But a small bite and a book is not the same.
It's different.
Because the book is like a deep dive. Yeah. So if you really want to know a subject well, beyond just an acquaintance with it, no substitute for reading. So I grew up in a Brunei where there was, when I was little, no television.
Yeah, no TV.
And so no television, no internet, of
Nothing,
course, and so on.
Yeah.
So this is a world it's difficult for you and your generation to imagine.
Yeah, to comprehend.
So for me, books were the connection to the bigger world. So my challenge, of course, was there was no Amazon, so you can't
order books and all this.
So I would rely on parents traveling, and whenever they said, "What would you like to have when we are traveling?" I would say books.
Oh, very good.
And then it became a lifelong habit. Whenever I travel, so some people when they travel, they look at which places are good to visit and see, and some people look for restaurants. I look for bookshops.
Some people look for magnets, Dato. Yeah, it's very typical.
Is that you?
No, not me. I'm not a magnet. Magnets, no globe cut. No, I'm not.
Dia is magnets.
Yeah, I know. I understand that. That's true. Okay, that's a good point. I think I've been starting that as well. I think during my travels, but not for myself, the books. But I have 2 boys, so wherever we go,
Great.
I pick up books for them as well. So it's different language and different place. So, but it's something for them to see as well. Speaking of books, Dato, what's a must read for everybody? I think I've asked this for you previously. In terms of that one book that has changed the way you see things.
So the one book for me may not be the one book for you.
Of course, Dato.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we all have different needs, and we connect differently with different books. So for me, a book that comes to mind, apart from, religious books.
Of course, yeah.
So everyone has their own book.
Oh, yes, of course.
For me, it would be Machiavelli's Prince. Yeah. So Machiavelli lived in the 15th, 16th century, Italy. And he was an acute observer of power. In every society, in every situation, there's the question of who has the power. And he's been misunderstood. So people think, he's power crazy, which is not a nice compliment. But he just wanted to understand how people relate to each other in terms of power. So he's the one who asked the question. Yeah. Is it better to be loved or to be feared?
Understood, Dato.
Which is a very powerful question.
Yeah, it is. It is. And to answer that question, Dato, what do you think? Is it better?
Okay, so Machiavelli said it's ideal to be both loved and feared. But he said that's impossible. So if you had to choose. So he was referring to people in high positions.
Yeah, of course.
He said it is better to be feared. So for me, it depends on the context. Within my family, I prefer to be loved.
Of course.
I mean, if you see the problem with being feared is people don't tell you the truth.
That's true. That is true.
So you package your
in the nicest
sharing.
way. Understood, Dato. Understood.
So if you fear me and I said, Hannah, how are you?
No.
You will not tell me the truth.
No, I've had to tell the truth from day one, Dato. Good, bad, I've been. Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So if you want people to share, you cannot have them fear you.
Understood.
Now, actually, there is another option, which is we all want to be respected.
Understood, yeah.
So respect and fear is not the same thing. But the point is, this gentleman, and it's a slim volume.
Yeah.
So I recommend if you
I've listened to the audiobook version. So again, like I'm a different kind of learner. I'm not so much of a reader, but I listen to things.
As I get older, I'm also audio now.
Yeah, I'm listening to things, and I think I picked up I think one of my favorite lines from the book as well. One of the lines that to me struck out was, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." And I think in terms of in terms of being a leader or just having that as a person, as an quote unquote influential person, you can't really share all your full cards as a person, right? You would always have to play a certain role and a certain part in different places. As you mentioned, that at home you are like this. In organizations, I might not be, I will be entirely a different person.
Yeah.
And for you, I guess that then, is that the way in which people should approach leadership as well? Like, this is a very good leadership and strategy book. Yeah.
No, I think that's a good way of describing it.
Yeah.
So I describe it as a book about power, but actually it's a leadership strategy book.
Understood.
Yeah. So I'm impressed that after that conversation,
I actually took it up, and
yeah.
and then now I think like I've been going through back and forth in my head as well. Like, what does it mean to be truly Machiavellian in society or business and organization? So, again, just understanding more about how people truly work. Dato, you've got a very academic background, again, evident with the books, evident with the senior positions that you've held. You've studied in reputable universities, Australian National University, London School of Economics. How was your learning experience like early on in your career, Dato?
So I was not a disciplined student.
Okay.
Because I had a lot of extracurricular activities. I was a student organizer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I frustrated my teachers.
Okay.
I got a bit better when I did my master's at the LSE because I was a bit more mature.
Okay.
I guess I was not very mature, So I remember studying law for a while, but law requires discipline.
Yeah.
And I didn't have it.
Understood,
okay. So the one thing that I learned is that how to think independently. Yeah. So this is the key to education. Yeah. So my education so there are people whose education is centered on skills.
Understood, yes.
So in my case, it was not skills, but it was thinking. Yeah. Yeah. So what I learned is when somebody tells you a story or gives you an explanation, I have learned to discern between good explanations and not good ones.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So
there's a difference between them.
And I have learned to have my own viewpoint. And I've learned also how to communicate that viewpoint effectively.
Okay. Yeah.
So you can have a great idea,
Understood.
but if you cannot present it well,
Understood.
So
yeah.
Now that you are moderating many panels,
Yeah.
you will notice that some of your panelists are more effective than others.
Yes, of course. Some people I simply ask a simple question. Some people I really need to rope it out from them. And you were talking and you just touched on moderation, Dato. You've always been a keynote speaker on many levels. You've spoken on places like Asia Institute of Management, providing the keynote address, and at the same time we see you as moderator as well. I think this is also a peek into perhaps for our audience and our listeners as well on just some tips as well on moderation. Keynote speaking is one. Perhaps you're reading from a script. It's very scripted, but what are the tips and tricks in regards to being a good moderator? So
a good moderator, first important quality is a good moderator must be a good listener.
True.
You cannot zone out.
Yeah.
Now, Hannah, I consider you a good moderator.
Oh, thank you, Dato. Yeah. But sometimes I do. I do zone out. It depends. I mean, if the topic is way out there and it's like end of the day, but I try to be as engaged as I can be as well.
And a good moderator has to know how to keep the conversation going.
Yes.
And need to know how to land the helicopter.
Of course. When it ends, it's floating around, it's going back in circles. Okay, understood, Dato. I've had.
But there are tricks of the trade.
Of course, yeah.
The one last word.
The one last word. Okay, that's one tip.
And the good moderator has to keep time.
Yes,
without making it obvious.
Yeah, like it's 9:30 now. Everybody like, okay, understood. So okay. So tip 1, I think, is to just be a good listener, and then tip 2 is just the tricks of it. Just simplifying it. Okay, one last word, one last line, and then last but not least, just how do we land the conversation towards the very end as well.
Yeah. Now. Yeah. Good moderators have to avoid thinking of themselves as a panelist.
That's true.
Like speaking too much.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
So, because some moderators forget, hey, you're moderating. You're not a panelist.
That is understood.
You're not competing with your panel.
Understood, Dato. Speaking on various different platforms and various different panels, one of the biggest, I think, spaces that you've attended in terms of forums, I think, is notably the World Economic Forum. You've attended this once upon a time. I think, just to share, not many Bruneians have attended World Economic Forum. I think
I think some have.
Some have. But Dato, if you can, I think this would be an insight to us. Talk us through how was your experience at the World Economic Forum?
So the World Economic Forum's main difference is that it has succeeded in being a meeting place for very influential people from all walks of life. Yeah. So from politics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So heads of governments come.
Yeah.
Top business people.
Yeah.
Top intellectuals.
Yeah.
And they mix them up in a pretty egalitarian way. So I remember standing around, and there was, I think, Rupert Murdoch.
Okay.
In the vicinity.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the keyword, I think, when it comes to these kind of billion-dollar big summits is the word elite. And it's highly influential. Whatever happens in these kind of spaces determines trends. And I mean, a lot of people, I think my generation, I think for the audience listening as well, this is where the world's plans are being schemed. Is that right, Dato? Or is that a different way of looking at it?
Yeah, so that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And that's the World Economic Forum way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Hey, this is where it's all happening.
Yes.
But, there is a downside to it.
Of course.
The downside is a disconnection with the majority of people in the world.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So the World Economic Forum, in my view, is now, has a challenge in finding relevance in the world that we find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact is, the word elite today is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly a compliment.
Yeah, it's not. It's very secretive. It's very lucrative.
So I would say that it's great that you have the movers and the shakers, but it's also important that you find a way of connecting with the people on the ground.
Yeah.
How to do that is not easy.
Yeah.
So,
in terms of, I think, your representation, then, Dato, I think just to name, then World Economic Forum you've attended way back, and then now I understand your views in regards to World Economic Forum now. But once upon a time, you've also held significant roles in more regional roles. So there's APEC, there's also ASEAN as well. You've represented Brunei on many of these international platforms. What about then your engagements in the past in this space? In terms of ASEAN and APEC?
Every one of those forums taught me something.
Okay.
Yeah. So it taught me, for example, that although meetings are supposed to be where business and government meets, at these meetings, government calls the shots. Okay. So you've been involved in the APEC CEO Summit.
Yes.
That's supposed to be business and government meeting as equals.
Yes, equals, yes.
But the meeting is very unequal. I mean,
Oh,
it's the
the
government
rea-
people calling the shots, the business people all waiting,
more share. This is
waiting
the
for the time.
reality. Yes, Dato. Yeah.
So, the going back to what I said earlier,
Mhm.
it's whatever the forum, whatever the context, we learn from things. We learn things
Mhm.
which can help us in other areas. So, what have I learned?
Mhm.
I have learned that whenever you are at a meeting,
Mhm.
it's an opportunity to be heard and to be seen.
That's true. Yeah.
But in order to make use of that opportunity, you have to have the ability to think clearly what is it you want to say.
Yeah.
Say it and don't say more.
And that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Understood, Dato.
I am always struck by people at meetings
Mhm.
who say things that nobody can understand, create a bad impression of themselves.
Understood. Yes. Yeah. Macro level.
What was that person
Yeah.
saying?
Yes, understood.
Yeah.
So, what is then your view now of, I would say, the relevance of forums and meetings in general? So, I've touched on World Economic Forum at the top. It's super elite. There's the ASEAN and APEC forums. Then, what do you think, Dato, is a good forum? I understand you said just now that people can voice out and people are learning, but again, just redefining then a good forum. Is it it should it be two ways, like as in there's some workshops there for people to attend, or is it just like just from the speaker to the audience? Because right now in terms of forums, I thought they're getting much more interactive, in terms of like breakout rooms, breakout sessions and all this. So
I think interactive is important.
yeah.
Diversity is important.
A representation.
Yeah,
Yes, understood. Yeah.
So, bringing people who actually don't share the same views is important.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
But there has to be some ground rules.
Okay.
Yeah, like respect.
Of course.
Yeah. So I have been to forums where there are very clever, opinionated people who are disrespectful. Who basically shout other people down.
Oh.
I'm dramatizing.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work. So you need to create an environment where people are comfortable about sharing different opinions without thinking that they will be shouted down. Yeah. So
an open forum instead of a top down.
Yeah.
But are you one?
ASEAN 100.
Yeah, ASEAN 100.
Yeah,
leadership
ASEAN 100. Asia Inc. Forum did this for almost 10 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ASEAN 100.
So one day,
Yeah.
Usually dinner with the head of government,
Yeah.
and then a mixture of people, every panel, men, women,
Different. Yeah.
NGOs,
Diverse. Yeah.
politicians,
Yeah.
people in business.
Yeah.
Well moderated.
Of course. Yeah.
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 I think that you have the video clips of an.
Yeah,
so
I do.
That for its genre,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah, okay, that's understood, Dato. I think then we know in terms of just knowing how to throw a very good, I would say, forum, high level meeting. I think that is definitely what we're going to be looking for when it comes to Asia Inc.
But now we have podcasts.
Yeah, we have in person. There's a mix right now, Dato. Some people truly value as well being in person because this is the time where people actually get to meet each other. But at the same time, I mean, there's there's an invisible world beyond us where people, probably late at night at 10 p.m. are actually watching things from World Economic Forum, like what I do at 10 p.m. I mean, in regards to, I think just watching things on YouTube now, Dato, you can rewatch and you can play back and and in terms of insights, you get to see various different places. So there's other summits, things like Bloomberg Summit, there's various other events as well. You've been doing business not just in Brunei but also within the ASEAN region, Dato. Are there lessons you think, Brunei can learn from other ASEAN countries that have successfully diversified their economies? I'm touching on a bit of Brunei now. A little bit sensitive, but what have you learned in regards to what other ASEAN countries have been doing?
So, the importance of timely decision making. So unfortunately, we live in an impatient world. Investors, entrepreneurs are impatient people. I guess if you were super patient, you wouldn't choose to be an entrepreneur. You'd go into the civil service.
No, yeah. Oh, okay.
So when you have a project, you want to know fairly quickly, can or cannot.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think our decision making is sometimes slower than it should be.
Yeah.
And our neighbors, we live in a competitive world.
Yeah.
So if people come here and it takes too long, they will go to Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we have our strengths. Our strengths is a stable environment, the rule of law. So if someone owes you money in Brunei, you sue, you are likely to get, the law will help you.
Of course.
Okay. It's not like the rule of the strongest. There's a law.
There's law.
Yeah. So we have those strengths. But I think timely decision making is something that is important. If it takes too long, we cannot expect the world to be understanding.
That's true. Can I ask another question? I think it's a bit more focused now in terms of, would you, Dato, encourage more FDIs than to come to Brunei, knowing how Brunei's pace is as is now compared to others? But given the circumstances, do you encourage more FDIs than to come to Brunei?
That's a good question, Hannah. I think it's important we encourage FDI because our needs are such that we cannot do them on our own. And even Singapore encourages FDI. The United States encourages FDI. So foreign direct investment is a crucial part of economic success. But the important thing for us is to be realistic in terms of what it means to encourage FDI. We cannot simply say this is how we do things here. We have to look at the UAE.
Of course,
we have to look at Qatar.
And Dubai.
We have to look at Malaysia.
Of course, yes.
And we can say we are Brunei. We don't want to do everything that they do. But it's like if you want to be good at a sport.
Yes.
You have to look at your competitors.
That's it.
You cannot say, okay, this is how I'm going to train and I don't care. You can't do that. So I think we need to have that realistic appraisal of where we are good and where more improvement needs to be done.
So you've touched on the importance of FDI coming into Brunei. There's various other, I would say, urgent issues in Brunei that are happening around. There's lots of talks about things like unemployment in regards to the youth, mismanagement in terms of budget allocations. What do you think is one of the more urgent issues when it comes to Brunei besides FDI? There's an array. There's a lot, Dato.
So I see FDI as means to an end. What is the end? The end is a growing economy that presents opportunities to young people, opportunities to find good jobs,
of course.
And for business people to be able to make money, grow their business.
Of course, for locals,
So I'm not saying FDI for the sake of FDI.
It's not.
FDI for the sake of our economy and our people. So you mentioned unemployment.
Yes.
So I don't have the numbers, but I just have the sense that Gen Z, your generation, finding it more and more difficult to find good jobs.
That is true.
I just have the sense that salaries in Brunei are beginning to be a lot lower than Singapore. Now, in fairness, cost of living in Brunei is a lot lower. So when you compare, you cannot just compare salaries.
Understood.
So it's a lot cheaper to live in Brunei than to live in Singapore. But I think there are some indicators that tell us that we need to create more employment opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the starting point is to know ourselves.
Have you been hearing stories from friends and family in regards to looking for
Some
jobs?
of my friends, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So some of my friends. So I like to talk to those of my friends who used to work in government retired.
Okay.
So I would ask them,
Yeah.
how many children have you got?
Yeah.
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 That's the kind of question that older people
We ask. Yes, of course.
How many children have you got?
Yeah,
Have you got any grandchildren?
Yeah, of course.
And then the next question would be, where are your children working?
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
Now, if they say, oh, I have 3 kids and they all have their own business, I am thinking, must be tough.
Yeah. Challenging, yes. Yeah.
But not in every case. So some people,
might be thriving.
They might be doing well.
Yeah.
But this is an environment that is difficult for business.
Yeah.
If they say, my kids are all looking for jobs, then I know that this is a stress factor. Because when the children are not employed, it imposes burdens on the family.
Yeah, of course.
So unemployment affects not just those looking for jobs, but for their families. Of course. Because they live at home.
Yeah, it creates a ripple
effect.
Fed. Yes, understood, Dato. In terms of the challenges that I think youth face in terms of unemployment, there's things like the gig economy, and there's things like, I would say, like people doing part-time jobs. Is there another alternate route for them? Do you then encourage the youth to do business? Should everybody then be an entrepreneur? Is that something of an option for people?
It is, but not for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. So not everyone is suited to be an entrepreneur.
Why so, Dato?
Because being an entrepreneur requires a resilience that some people don't have. So and I'm not meaning this as a way of criticizing the way people are.
Yeah, understood.
I think for some people,
Yeah.
working a steady job as a teacher, a civil servant, as someone in the army or police, may be the best thing.
Yeah.
You know, society needs people in different fields.
Yeah, of course.
Entrepreneurs are different generally. They are willing to take risks.
Yeah.
They're willing to deal with failure.
Yeah.
They don't, when they fall, they pick themselves up.
That's true, Dato.
And not everyone can do that.
That is true, Dato. I mean, there's a quote I think that comes around. I mean, if you work a 9 to 5, I mean, that's it. That's your day job. You work a 9 to 5. But if you're an entrepreneur, you are 24/7, and everybody's gonna catch on to you. Everybody's gonna try to connect with you, call you, even on a Saturday and Sunday.
So with my own children, if they say, I think I'm going to start my own business, I get very nervous.
Okay.
So my advice is, get a job first.
Yeah.
Work on your business plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Learn as much as you can from your company, your employer.
Yeah, of course.
And then when you're ready, then you start your business. But otherwise, it's like jumping into a pool at the deep end.
And you're not ready. And you're not ready to swim, Dato. I think this really alludes to Ali Baba's quote, Jack Ma. In your 20s, you work for a very great leader. Then in your 30s, if you're ready, then you start. You must work for a great person first, and then you start something. In regards to, I would say, like the overall Brunei business culture, then, Dato, we've been touching on unemployment and entrepreneurship. What are your thoughts on the ease of doing business in Brunei? And then at the same time, just the general overview of Brunei's business culture and landscape.
I think that maybe that's a question I should be asking you. So I am fortunate that the businesses that I sit on the boards of are all established.
Yeah.
So they've gone through that startup phase.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And they now have critical mass. So so if you look at Baiduri Bank, the Radisson Hotel, they've gone through that journey. National insurance.
Of course,
they have resources to deal with operating a business? I think that is a very good question to ask someone starting.
Okay. Yeah.
Or someone just coming in.
Yeah.
So anecdotally, meaning I've heard stories.
Yeah.
But anecdotal evidence is not data.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
So I think that decision making still could be improved.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
In terms of getting approvals.
Yeah. Yes, this is true, Dato. Yeah, in terms of business. Yeah.
And so,
but yeah,
the attrition rate for businesses in Brunei is very high.
Yeah.
Many do not succeed.
Yeah.
And if you look
quite
around,
recently, yes,
you,
there's so
you go
many
to the
shops.
shopping malls, you see how many are
So
in
many-
transition
yeah.
out or in.
Yep, so many closing, but at the same time, Dato, there's this response in our business society, that there's a lot more of these, like for example, cafes cropping up. Everybody is trying to do their own cafe. Everybody's trying to do a coffee business, a matcha business. Like, what is your response to that then? I mean, there's a lot of shops closing and also relocating and all this, but there's also these smaller pop-ups that are happening as well.
Now, do you go to them yourself?
Yes, I do. There's
Yeah,
so many, Dato.
So why don't you give me your view and then I'll give you mine?
Oh, Dato.
Because you know that sector better than I do.
Oh, yes, Dato. I think in terms of the pop-ups that happen, realistically, there's one too many. I've been seeing a lot of people, I would say, doing a lot of coffee, a lot of matcha shops, people doing it from the boot of their cars, opening up stores here and there. But I just feel like it's such a response to the whole issue of youth unemployment as well. I mean, I would say, a diversified economy, you are talking about different various sectors. I would ideally look to have Brunei as sort of like a maker community or society in terms of business. I mean, for Bruneians, for example, making their own shoes, making their own cars, making their own wallets, really diversifying things and not just focused on F&B. What are your thoughts then, Dato?
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've learned, and I've had a long journey, is that whatever business you want to go into, you have to understand that market.
Yeah.
If there are too many players,
yes,
you have to ask yourself, how are you different?
That's true. Yeah.
Because after your friends and family have come and drunk your coffee, who else is going to come?
Yeah, who else is your client? Yeah.
So if you have something special,
by all means,
there are others who come.
Yeah.
So you need to ask yourself, what have I got that my competitors don't?
Yeah.
And then you have to ask yourself, can I do this really well over a sustained period of time?
Yeah.
Because all startups have a honeymoon phase.
Yeah. It's all good in the first 6 months and
And then after a while, if you don't make money, if every month you have to take some of your savings out to put in the business, you get tired.
Yeah, understood, Dato. Yeah.
And then after a while, the business will close.
Yeah, understood.
So, but the key is, and I hope that this will be something that we will do a deeper dive in for our Thrive conference.
Yes, of course, Dato.
So it's like,
how do you? Yeah, I think the question is that, like, how do you, just to answer this episode's question as well, is how do you build a business then that truly stands the test of time? Like, for example, coffee and matcha is current for now, but in the next 3 years, 5 years, if everybody is opening a coffee and matcha shop, like, what else is there?
So firstly, you have to have a realistic look at the market that you are in.
Yeah.
Secondly, you have to have a realistic look at yourself. Thirdly, you have to do it one boring step at a time. Because business is not all glamour and excitement.
It's not great,
when we have our events, it just seems like,
it looks nice, yes.
And then we all know the exciting stories.
Yeah.
The Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musk, how they started, how they became billionaires, and so on. So those are the glamour stories. But most business stories are not.
That's true.
It's one step at a time. And then suddenly, one day, if you if you're one step at a time is in the right direction, one day you wake up and you've got a winner.
That's true, Dato. I think one prime example of I wouldn't say a boring business, but one of the longest standing F&B cafes in or restaurants in Brunei is Jingchu. Day in and day out, it's the
Yeah.
same thing. So
Yeah,
it's roti kawin, kacang kawin, same
our
thing.
favorite.
Yeah, our favorite. And I think just to share with everybody, what's your go-to, Dato? When you go to Jingchu?
Peanut bun
Peanut bun
and kopi.
and kopi, of course. You like it sweet as well, Dato?
I like it sweet. So when they say kurang manis, I said no.
Yeah, and I understand this. I recently as well went to KB. There's another I think similar store to this. There's no menu. It's just, by memory and by I think generations, people just order the same toast, blueberry toast, and it doesn't need to be fanciful, but you've got, like a certain set customers always coming same day, same time and all this.
So my only regret,
Yeah.
I love Jinchu.
Yeah.
My only regret is now we know quite a lot about health.
Oh yeah. It's not
So, kopi every day.
and big slap of butter. Oh no.
Yeah. So it's a treat. Maybe once every 10 days.
That's true, Dato. We've been doing a lot of, I would say, entrepreneurship town halls, forums, these kind of events. We hear many stories of how people start business. It's one of two things. They start out of passion. It's a hobby. It's a side project for them. And then at the same time, there are those people that have had to do business because there's no other option. They need to put food on the table. Again, with rising costs and inflation, what is your best advice for people out there who want to start their own business? I understand you said get a job first, Dato, but what if getting a job is not an option? You need to find fast money. You need to get money to pay bills, help parents. What should people do first?
So I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
you need to be very realistic which market you are in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to know. Yeah.
And you need to start small.
Yeah.
So I get very anxious for the person speaking to me.
Yeah.
When they have a grand idea.
Very big. Yep. Understood. Yep.
So I think it was Jack Ma, but you need to verify this, who said, fortunes are made from catching fish, not catching whales.
That's true.
Okay?
Yes.
So start small.
Yeah.
Okay. And recognize that it's not all glam.
Yes, it's not.
Yeah. It is.
You see the highlight?
Pretty boring, one step at a time.
That is true, Dato. Yes. I think.
And the other thing.
Yeah.
Remember how important trustworthiness is.
That's true.
So if you cannot pay your supplier, assuming that you are in a business, you need to be upfront with the supplier, saying, I'm going to be late this month. What you cannot do is suddenly not answer his calls.
Understood.
Or her calls.
Understood.
Yeah. So trustworthiness, because that's when you lose that, very hard to regain.
That's true, Dato. That's true. We're touching on, I would say, a bit of finance right now. It's in terms of like conversations around money. I want to ask you, I would say, a series of rapid fire questions, but you can always elaborate. This is not just one word, but a rapid fire of questions, of topics I would say is very relatable to everybody, which is money. Money matters, money talks, success and wealth. Just tell me, Dato, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Dato, what does it take for somebody to truly succeed?
To have good relationships. So, is this a money question? Because sometimes in the pursuit of money, you forget the important people in your life. So, money is a means to an end, not an end in itself.
We often see people flashing their wealth with, fancy luxury cars, designer clothes, and flashy lifestyles. But there's a whole other way of looking and showing success. Things like quiet wealth, where people keep things very low key. In terms of this, Dato, where do you stand?
So I'm always a little suspicious of people who need to demonstrate their wealth in an obvious way.
Yeah.
For me, and again, I don't want to appear as if I know better.
Yeah, understood.
But for me, that sometimes reflects insecurity. You want people to know you've succeeded.
Yeah.
So you buy a super large gold Rolex.
Oh.
And then you wear a short sleeve shirt.
And just to like show it out. And Dato doesn't wear a gold watch.
or you buy a very expensive Hermes handbag.
Oh, yeah.
And you make sure everyone knows that it's Hermes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you really detest this kind of...
Yeah. But so my experience is the best business people I've got to know usually don't do this.
That's true, Dato.
So I think Nisa was in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And
One of
can
our
testify to the fact that Warren Buffett, the world's greatest investor on record, lives in a pretty simple house. Okay. Now, I have a friend. So let's use a Brunei example. I have a friend. He's actually a Pingiran.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mention his name because he's a modest man, so he might not want. He's very successful. And I used to play squash with him. Yeah. And this was a long time ago when I played squash. Okay. And I remember being struck by how he drove a simple second-hand car. Yeah. When he could afford not to. Yeah. And even when he could afford, he always erred on the side of being low-key. And I was not surprised when recently I caught up with him to find out that he's become very successful. Yeah.
I think that...
But one boring step at a time.
Yeah. I think the quote as well is, everybody tries to look rich, but it's one thing to actually be rich. So just to go on this wealth conversation, again, what's the best way for someone then now to start their journey on building wealth in 2025?
Okay. That's a very good question. And I don't want to sound like a financial guru because I made a lot of mistakes. Yeah. But rule number one would be you should always spend less than you earn.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, you need to find a way of living within your means. I don't mean you.
Everybody. Yes, of course, that too. Yeah. I'm learning as well.
I mean myself.
Yeah.
Secondly, you need to learn how to invest.
Okay.
So with the money you save, you need to know how to invest it. But with a special attention paid to safety. Okay. A lot of people save and put the money in the wrong things and it's all gone.
What are wrong things, Dato? Where should you not put your money?
Okay, I have a rule.
Yeah.
If something is too good to be true, it is too good to be true.
It might be a scam.
If someone comes to you and say, "Oh, this one guaranteed you will triple your money." Okay.
No such thing.
Say, be nice and walk away.
Yeah, it's the number one. Yeah, understood.
So, do your homework.
Yeah.
So, I have my eldest daughter. Is wanting to be her business thing. Is to look for properties in areas that not everyone is looking for. Yeah, so she goes to smaller cities. So not London.
Yeah, of course.
Not Paris.
Yeah.
Because firstly, it's very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Secondly, everyone is there.
Yeah. Everybody.
So she's meticulous in doing her homework. Okay.
Yeah.
She will check what the prices are.
Yeah.
She will visit. Yeah. So she told me recently, she said, when you look at the photos in the brochure, it's always different.
Of course. Yeah. And when you see
so she will go in, she'll say, the lighting is not good. There's a building coming next door which blocks off everything. That kind of thing. So do your homework.
Do my homework. Okay, I'm going to keep this note, Dato. What is it that people tend to underestimate when it comes to finance?
They tend to underestimate how difficult it is to make money.
Yeah. It's actually very difficult.
So one question I ask myself whenever I go into a deal is, I always ask myself, what is the worst that can happen? And if the worst, so I imagine the worst.
Yeah.
Okay? What if this
worst case
really,
scenario.
and if I can live with the worst, then it means it's okay. Obviously, we don't want the worst to happen.
Yeah.
But if you imagine the worst and you say, I can live with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
But if the worst means that you're out in the street.
No, that's something else, Dato.
And ring fence, of course.
Of course, yeah.
The money for the kids.
Yes, that's important, Dato. What is the best financial advice that you've been given? I mean, you've been sharing with us a lot of advice. What was the best advice that was given to you, Dato?
I think the importance of investing what you save safely.
Safely.
Because for another podcast.
Yeah, we have many.
I'm happy to talk about mistakes that I made,
Yeah.
because I made just one big mistake was I bought a regional business magazine a number of years ago.
Yeah.
It was called Asia Inc. magazine.
Yeah, Asia Inc. magazine.
And I thought I would be a crash hot publisher.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't have a clue, but I completely underestimated my ignorance. Yeah. So knowing what you don't know is important.
Yeah. And it helps you.
And I put, for me, a lot of money into this, and in the end lost it all. Yeah. The good thing, of course, is that Asia Inc. Forum was born as a result of that failure.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. It's rarely, failure doesn't mean it's end of everything.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world.
Sometimes it's the beginning of something else.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, Dato. What does it mean to have high standards?
To ensure that whatever you do, people still trust you. Yeah. So sometimes the temptation is there to do a quick one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The most important thing a man or woman can have is trustworthiness, a good reputation.
Good reputation. Yes.
Once you lose your reputation, it will sooner or later come back to bite you. Now, you can do a fast one and make money. So that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you are ever faced with that moral dilemma, resist.
Okay.
Because life is a marathon.
Yeah, it is. It's not a
sprint.
No, it's not. Yes, Dato. What separates the rich from the wealthy?
Now, you're sounding like Machiavelli.
At this point, Dato, I mean, no, there's many different tiers to, I would say, wealth and being rich. There's a degree of separation from somebody who has thousands, millions, and billions.
I don't know. I think everything depends on who you're comparing with. But comparing with other people is not a healthy thing.
Yeah, understood it. Yeah.
I remember the story of this billionaire who got very upset whenever he looked at the Forbes list.
And he was not there.
Yeah, because he was 156.
Yeah.
He was number one in his country.
Yeah.
But 156 in the world, and he suddenly started feeling very jealous. Yeah. So I think that you need to have money in order to lead a good life. But money is not everything. The important thing, in my view, apart from money, is to make sure you have good relationships with people you love.
That's true.
So sometimes we forget that.
Yeah, that's true.
We take the people we love for granted. So within your family, your significant other, your children, your parents. And then, of course, we all need friends.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah? So not just family, friends.
Yeah.
And if you have good relationships, plus you have financial security.
Then
now, some people like to say, what's your number?
Yeah.
Is it 500,000?
Yeah.
Is it 1 million?
Yeah.
Is it 2 million? Is it 3 million? I'm not sure whether that's helpful.
Yeah, it's not that.
So I
avoid those kind of.
Yeah. You don't want to be always stressed about money.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
But you also don't want to think that if only I had that, all my problems would go away. Because sometimes it's the beginning of your problems.
That it is. That's why I think the next question, Dato, just falls right into place. What do you think money does to people?
Sometimes it makes them better,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it makes them worse. Yeah. So now I don't know him, but I have been following him from a distance.
Okay.
Bill Gates.
Okay.
Okay. So Bill Gates, he will go down in history as one of the great entrepreneurs of his time.
Mm-hmm.
He co-founded Microsoft.
Of course, yeah.
And he did a fantastic job. And if he had not given so much money away, he would be probably the richest man in the world.
True.
Yeah. But he's given a big chunk of it away. Now he has devoted himself to philanthropy.
Mm-hmm. I see the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yeah.
Yes. And he seems to have found a lot of purpose and satisfaction in doing that. So so for him, it's not the number, but he obviously has enough to lead a very comfortable life. But for him, it's the impact that money allows him to have. Yeah. So most of us, of course, think in much smaller numbers. Yeah. So if you have enough, so firstly, you should have your own house.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Okay, so that is tick. Secondly, you should have your own car.
Yes, your own car. Yes, that's true.
Thirdly, you should have enough to educate your children well.
That's true.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't have to be British or Australian schools, because now in Brunei we have good schools.
Yeah, good schools. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be university abroad.
Yeah.
It's nice to have, but it could be UBD. Yeah. Then you need to have enough resources for an emergency fund, just in case the unexpected happens.
Yeah, that's true.
So is it 6 months? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? For you to determine.
Understood.
And then you need to have a source of income, and savings that you can build up eventually to the day when you decide you don't want to work.
Okay.
So that requires a strategy.
Yeah.
And then, but all that doesn't count for much if you don't have good family relationships and friends.
Yeah. So that is one thing that I would say money cannot buy.
Absolutely. And sometimes it brings out the worst in people. They think sometimes money, so I know of families where they're wealthy, but relationships between family members are bad.
Understood. Yeah.
Because of money.
Yeah, because of money. Yeah.
They're all looking at each other with great suspicion.
Because of money and
see each other instead of as family members, as rivals.
That's true, Dato. Yeah, understood. That's the reality of money that a lot of people don't really get to see as well. I mean, again, now I have questions, Dato. I've got last two ones, but what is the number one secret about money that the average person should know? The secret to maybe attracting wealth, or what can we do to get more money in life?
I think understanding that money can actually work for you, but you need to know how to put it to work. So financial literacy actually is the one important life skill that we don't learn at school or university.
Yeah, that's one thing. Yeah.
So most people don't like talking about money.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact,
it was not taught to us.
You're doing something a bit
very Robert Kiyosaki at this point.
Yeah. So and yet it's so important.
Yeah.
And you should start early. People should start early. So every month, in my view, if you are able to set aside some money as savings, learn to invest it so that it starts at some point working for you.
Okay.
Because it's a wonderful feeling when you actually don't have to rely on your salary alone.
Another source of income. I think this definitely answers like a bigger question in terms of just financial literacy in general. Should people be exposed to it much more early in schools? I mean, there's not much exposure to this in Brunei. I think you just come to an age 18 years old, all of a sudden I have a bank account. I don't know how to manage money, and then this is where poor, I would say, financial management happens. Thank you so much, Dato. It's been a lot of, I would say, amazing and impressive advice. I think all our audience and our listeners would definitely learn one or thing or two about money and wealth from this episode. It's always such a pleasure to have a conversation with you, Dato, on a professional level as well as on a personal level. I would say, I've got many questions. I wish I can talk to you for many hours, Dato, but I can't. If I can just ask you one final question, it's this.
Now you're
No,
getting,
you're not.
now,
No,
now you're getting me nervous.
No, no,
One
no.
final question. Now, please.
I would love to ask you about advice. If you could turn back time, Dato, and you are perhaps sitting in my chair. You are now at my age. I'm 30. I'm a little bit wide-eyed. I'm naive, and I'm still growing. What advice would you have given to your younger self and to those who are like myself at this age?
So I'm always a bit hesitant about giving advice
Understood.
because it assumes that I know better. In fact, I've made many mistakes.
Yeah.
I guess you asked me for one, but I'll give you two.
Sure, Dato.
First is I wish I was a better listener. So when I was a young man, I was not a good listener. I always had this view that I knew better, even though I was quite diplomatic, but in my mind, I know better. Yeah. So, and there is so much value in life being a good listener. Now, good listener doesn't mean you accept everything that is told to you.
Yeah.
You still have to process and decide for yourself. But it means you open your mind.
That's true.
The other thing is to learn how important failure is in terms of being a better person. Because every failure is rich in lessons. So I have learned I've had a number of business failures. So we tend to talk about our business successes.
Yeah.
Because so when you read accounts of people, you tend to read the good bits.
The highlights, the highlights.
The people who have failed tend to be very quiet about their failures because nobody wants the world to know.
Understood that.
But I have personally learned a lot from where I made mistakes. So errors in judgment, errors in trust, sometimes trusting the wrong people. And every one of those has taught me to be a better investor, a better businessman, and a better person. So those are the two things. Yeah. Better listener and learn from failure and mistakes.
I will replay that back in my head every single time after this. Now, Dato, I think I've kept you long enough for this episode, Dato. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, your advice. Sitting with you for this long 1 hour and a bit has made me learn so much. It's been such a pleasure to have a peek, I would say, into one of Brunei's wisest and sharpest minds. If you like what you're seeing, to our dear audience and our listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Asia Inc. Forum BN. Follow us and subscribe to the Conversations of Change podcast by Asia Inc. Forum. Follow us and subscribe to Asia Inc. Forum also on our different pages. We've got LinkedIn, Instagram, and also Facebook. Thank you once more, Dato. I'll shake your hand on this one.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you so much. I'm your host, Pengiran Hannah, Country Lead for Asia Inc. Forum. Together, let's shape the future of Brunei, one conversation at a time.